Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first episode of the Bozcast, featuring Brian Bosworth. I am Parker Thune. Next to me here, of course, you have the Boz himself, and you have our good friend, Wallace Marsh. This is your Bozcast crew, and over the course of this podcast series, however long we wind up doing this thing, hopefully years and years of illustrious success, but we're going to welcome some excellent guests to this podcast, including several that we have lined up for this very first episode.
You're in the can.
Very topically relevant, very currently relevant. Let's talk a little bit about how we got here, first and foremost, before we pivot to the spring game, everything that is, of course, in the news cycle right now, Owen Heinecke and all of that. The three of us, what an unlikely trio to be sitting here in front of cameras, on microphones, talking about OU athletics together. So,
really?
Boz...
That's unlikely?
At least me. Shoot.
We're
three OU grads.
And we're the OGs from the 80s. And then we're just bringing you up because you're the new pup, right? So we got to feed the pup.
That's right.
Feed the pup once and he never goes away. He's constantly knocking on the door. Hey, feed me, feed me. So feed us, man. You're the media guy. Guide us. We'll follow.
Yeah, well, we talked a little bit about it in the trailer,
Yep.
Boz. But this is something that folks have been urging you to do for years and years and years, and you've always said no up until now. So what changed?
Well, I just think that when you look back on your life and different times of your life, you're wondering how you got to where you end up being, and then the magical, wonderful, magnificent journey that it has been, and then you couple that with the wonderful friends that you meet along the way, and those people that become not only your support and your dear friends, but more importantly, your family. You kind of lean on them, and you're ride or die kind of guys. So, this guy here, stuck out in California for all those many years when that old Hotel California song you could check out but you could never leave. And this guy had the ticket. So he was very instrumental in helping me get back home. And that meant a lot because what it did was it reestablished a new sense of purpose for me. Came back. I found a redemptive story. I found a great relationship with Jesus Christ that I use on a daily basis. And then he really wanted to do the 30 for 30. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know if we need that 30 for 30. There's really nothing more to say. But his tenacity, you've got a great story and people want to hear it. Life is difficult, life is messy, life is fun, and you want to share it with as many people as possible. And there seems to be a lot of gratitude out there that wants to hear these stories. So let's tell stories.
That's right. And we're going to have conversations about college football on this podcast. We're going to have conversations about the illustrious University of Oklahoma, the common thread that ties us all together. But this is just going to be a lot of conversations about life.
I think so, because you're in a particular situation because us old timers can help you navigate, the busy road.
I need it. Lord knows I need it.
And your life is complicated because you've complicated it with your own passions. And we want to see you crash and burn because you don't learn unless you crash and burn, right? But we want to be there to give you CPR, to wake you up and say, Parker, are you here? You here? Let's go. Get up. Let's go. Brush it off. Let's go to the next adventure.
Parker, experience is the greatest teacher.
It sure is.
Unfortunately, the tuition is very expensive.
Ain't that the truth?
Very well.
It's bars from Wallace.
Right.
Boz and I didn't meet until we started doing this. Wallace and I initially connected. I think the bond there was our shared heritage from the state of Nebraska, probably, right?
That's exactly right. I went to high school in the state of Nebraska. You went to high school in the state of Nebraska.
And yet we
found each other.
We found each other via the University of Oklahoma.
There's only one, Oklahoma.
That's right.
There is only one. Well, let's get started. As we typically will on this podcast, this is going to be a real sizzler of an episode. Just want to prepare you guys in advance. Not every episode of the Bozcast is going to be near as long as this first one, but we packed so much good content into this first one for all of you. We figured you'd forgive us if things got a little lengthy in duration. But let's kick off with Boz Buzz, and we are sitting here in the suites at the illustrious University of Oklahoma, gentlemen, following the spring game, which actually isn't the culmination of spring football this year. Brent Venables mentioned they have a couple of practices on the other end of the spring game, but for all intents and purposes, the spring game marks the end of the spring practice period, and this is where we kind of enter the drought, the football drought, until August and fall camp rolls around. So we got to see some good action today. Red versus white here at Owen Field.
Crimson versus cream.
Boz, I think the natural place to start is the Sooners have a redshirt senior quarterback going into his final year of college football in John Mateer. Did some really good things last season, did some not so good things last season. It was kind of a mixed bag for the Washington State transfer. What did you see from him today that encourages you heading into the 2026 campaign?
Well, I think when you see what John was able to do in early 2025, and you saw that there was a star that was there, and then the key injury against Auburn really derailed that progression. He struggled after that, not mentally, he struggled physically, and you saw that his mechanics changed, and I think he was trying to, figure out how he was going to continue. He's such a competitive guy. One of the great stories that we've talked to Jim Nagy about was it a good idea for John to go and play at the University of Texas? And John wanted to play. He had just had surgery on that thumb, I think 10 days prior. So having surgery on your throwing thumb and having a pin in it, and then going to play, in a big game, the Red River rivalry game against the University of Texas, and getting beat up like he did, I think it frustrated him. At the same time, he felt like he had to press because all the weight was on his shoulders, and you could tell that he was doing things that he probably couldn't and shouldn't have been doing at that time. He also wasn't getting the help that he needed. If you don't have a running game, especially in the SEC, and all you do is rely on the passing game, that's going to get found out and got pretty quick. He also didn't have the help in the offensive line, so he didn't have that time to set up and really, scope the field and find the receivers that were open. So he was throwing stuff in small windows, and I do remember a lot of times where John's velocity is tremendous on the ball, and sometimes he has a touch problem. And when you're throwing a 7 to 10 or 12-yard pass across the middle, and it's coming out at 150 miles an hour, and it's hitting those hands, there's a lot of deflections that are going on. So I think he learned a lot from last season, and getting the team into the playoffs and learning what it was like to get ahead of Alabama, and showing not only the team but the nation that Oklahoma they're not all the way back by any stretch of the imagination. And I think we rode that last half of the season on our defensive shoulders. But I think what he did this offseason and what we saw today in the spring game, it really showed me that he really took the time to work on the mechanics and fix the things that were problematic through the course of the latter part of the season. And his receivers, his weapons that are available to him, really showed and shined today. The offensive line, again, real young at the beginning of the season last year, they stepped up, and now they've got that extra year of experience. So I think with a running game, and not to mention the tight ends, I'm super excited about the tight ends, and that tight end room looks really, really good.
On that note, second player we want to highlight here in Buzz. Wallace, you guys mentioned there was one tight end in particular that really stood out to the two of you from up here.
We were all over Rocky Beers. Yeah, he had a couple of great plays. He looked fantastic.
Yeah, and he's got the size. We got the big kid, from Tennessee. We got the big kid from Florida, and we got the big kid from Colorado State. They all bring different aspects of skill to that position now that John can not only use in the red zone, he can use them in the running game. We can use them in over the course of the middle of the field, and they're big-bodied guys, which is what we haven't had in the past. So having that extra poundage on the line of scrimmage for the running game was tremendous. And the running game looked really good today. When did you see it, Brad?
Yeah, well, the running game did look really good across the board. No Torrey Blaylock, no Xavier Robinson. Those are going to be Oklahoma's two lead backs this fall. But even in their absence, Boz, the dynamic of the red-white game was such that the red team basically consisted of all of the first team and a lot of the second team guys. Yeah. The white team was primarily the backups. So it was tough to gauge. It's tough to gauge when you have a bunch of elder statesmen that are experienced going up against a bunch of younger cats that aren't, haven't had nearly as many reps, especially on Saturdays in the fall. So you would expect
the competition was there.
It was there. You would expect the red team to get the better of the white team on a day like today. You would expect that there are going to be bigger holes up front that red offensive line clears. But even so, the three backs that we saw on the red side, Lloyd Avant, Jonathan Hatton, and DeZephan Walker. I want to specifically hit on him to close us out here because DeZephan Walker might have been the MVP of the day, the young freshman from the St. Louis area. I'm sorry, not the St. Louis area, the Kansas City area in Missouri.
And what I saw in him was vision at the line of scrimmage. He got the ball, was moving north and south, and when he saw a crack, he had the ability to maneuver left or right laterally and get into the hole, get into the crease, and get upfield with some steam. And that's what we haven't had in the past, and it really showed today.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but he reminded me a little bit of Damon Parker, the way he just got the ball and just took off. Little Clinton Griffin.
Why do you hate to say that?
I mean, the kid's what, 5'10", 210?
Thereabouts.
He hit the hole. He was explosive. We were hooting and hollering watching him carry the ball.
Well, I think in the SEC, having a smaller guy running the ball, but he's packed with power, is an advantage over the larger guy that gets tattooed as he's coming through the line of scrimmage. Especially with the size of our offensive lineman, if we can have him back there, and it takes a long time for a lot of our offensive running plays to kind of just to evolve. You know, it's frustrating. Sometimes you look at him, that took a lot of time from handoff to the point of line of scrimmage. But I know there's a scheme of blocking, and when you've got those kinds of guys that are 6'8", 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", and the size of the bodies that are there, it's very easy to get hidden behind those guys, and I think that can be an advantage for Henry.
Can I ask Brian, your good friend Rocky Kalmus' son had a big interception.
He got a big interception, man.
Yes.
I'm super proud of him, man. He picked it off from one of possibly our backup quarterback, Bo Bentley, threw it into triple coverage. But, you know, I've been a big fan of Rocky's for forever, obviously, and to see his son, you know, have those moments of greatness, I know it made him feel good too.
It was wonderful to see.
Yeah.
So over the course of this first episode of the Boscast, we're going to hear from Owen Heinecke. We're going to hear from his attorney, the great
Mary Quinn Cooper.
But first and foremost, we had the opportunity to sit down yesterday right here in these suites with the new athletic director at the University of Oklahoma, Roger Denny. Somebody that I'm sure every Oklahoma fan is eager to hear from as his tenure succeeding the great Joe Castiglione gets underway. So without further ado, here was our conversation with Roger Denny. Here we are high atop Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium with a man who needs no introduction, the new athletic director at the University of Oklahoma as of February 2026. Roger Denny, Boz, I understand you probably want to give him a little bit more triumphant
better
than an
introduction
intro.
than I mean, we don't have Toby Rowland here. I'm going to give him my best shot on this thing, but wearing number 81 linebacker, MVP of the ADs, Roger Denny. What a great name, by the way. I mean, that is an amazing name that you have, and we're just lucky and blessed that we have you as our new AD.
Glad to be here, man.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you.
Yeah.
How much do we want to grill this guy, Boz? He's been on the job 2 months now.
I know, he is green behind the goals. Here's the thing. You're coming from the media standpoint.
Yeah.
Right? So when we're having conversations, I think sometimes we lose sight of who we're talking to and what's the message we want to get across. And, you know, obviously from the media side, he's going to have that perspective, but I need you to be a little bit more understanding about where I'm coming from, right? So we're going to go back old school, and I'm going to represent.
Love it.
Love the throwback jerseys. They don't make these anymore like this, right? So I want to just represent the athletes that are on our campus.
How long has it been
Past,
since you
present, and future. Let's talk about.
How long has it been since you put that sucker on?
I mean, I put this thing on all the time.
Really?
Yeah, I walk around the house sometimes with just this and nothing else.
The old sand knit.
That's right. But I think it's important that having an AD, back when I was playing here, the AD was kind of like this standalone guy that we really never had any, interaction with. Nor did we want to, because if you were going to the AD's office, it's kind of like as a kid, we're going to the principal's
bad
office.
guy, huh?
I've done something wrong. But I think it's important that the AD have transparent relationships with all of the athletes here, because you are like the powerhouse of our program. And everything that filters through in greatness in our program has to be checked by you, right? So tell us a little bit about, you've only been here for a couple of months. You're walking in the shadows of greatness with Joe C. I mean, he was transformational in what he's done in our program from his time. And he's still here, and he's still going to be part of it. But interactions with what you have seen and where we're going, the direction that we want to go, what do you see what's needed from this point forward?
Yeah, I think to your point, you start with the student athletes.
Right.
Right. Everything you do, and I said this in my opening introduction is about opportunity, right? It's creating opportunities for those athletes to, whatever it is they want to do when they leave here, make sure that we're putting them in the best spot to go do that. So I've met with a few groups of student athletes, a few different teams. Every time I meet with them, I will tell them the exact same thing. Before you leave here, so whether it's a senior, a transfer, whatever it is, we're going to sit down and I'm going to ask you one question. And that's, did we fulfill the promise we made to you when we were recruiting you? Right? Because when we're recruiting them, we tell them everything.
Yeah.
Right? And so the question is, did we live up to our word? And so that's our measuring stick at every opportunity with the student athletes. And so with that as kind of the base of what we will do at every turn, it's finding ways to change and evolve and adapt and progress while holding the things that are really core to Oklahoma, holding true to those things. That's our charge.
Yeah, and I think a big question in that is when the guys get here, with the athletes, they get here, they generally have a very narrow vision because it's all about what they've done and what they're passionate about in their athletics. But the big picture is that, like, and I love what you said there, have you fulfilled that promise that we've made to you? At the end of the day, they have to give that effort, but they also have to have a plan. And sometimes they come here and they don't have a plan. They go, I'm just here playing, and it's a 4 year, and that 4 years goes it's about 1,600 days, and then it's over. So, do you have a conversation about what is your plan after your career is over? Because that day does come. Sometimes it comes sooner than later, but the plan after, I still think, is part of the responsibility not only of the university, but it's a growing plan. Where are you at in that plan? You know, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and how do you facilitate making sure that they're staying on course?
Yeah, I think it's making sure we're devoting time and resource to it, right? Like, that's generally my job. Number one on the list is, are the resources of our athletics program matching our priorities? And so it's, down in the south end zone here, it's sole mission, right?
Yep.
It's having that group of folks that work with our athletes every day, help them develop that plans. And some of our other buildings, it's the coaching staffs occupy that role. And then, we've got kind of our people development operation over in the north side of the end zone that, again, we're trying to take that and make sure we've got resources to every one of our athletes to do exactly what you said. But again, from my seat, it's making sure that we understand that's a priority and we're allocating resources to it.
Now, Roger, you said first thing, right off the bat there, it starts with the student athletes. And so I want to ask you about one student athlete that everybody in the community went to bat for. I mean, we're sitting here on a Friday morning. Tomorrow afternoon, this place is going to be packed full of Sooner fans for the spring game. But yesterday, we got the decision from Judge Thad Balkman over the Cleveland County Courthouse designating Owen Heinecke as eligible for another season of football here at Oklahoma. And so you're an ex-lawyer. Much has been made of that profile and you being, in many ways, the new age, the cutting edge style of athletic director for the era of college athletics that we're entering. How soon upon your arrival here did you kind of become acquainted with the Owen Heinecke situation? And I know you put out a statement yesterday, but what does it mean, not just to the football program, but to the Oklahoma community to have him back here for another year?
Yeah, before I got here. And so my very first conversation with Jim Nagy, the Friday the news breaks that I'm being hired as the AD, you get a bunch of calls that night. Coach Venables calls, a bunch of our coaches, but Jim Nagy calls, and we started that conversation that night. He said, look, we've got this thing coming down the pike. We got to pay attention to it. And so literally before day one even, not even day one. And so that's been a constant conversation. And that conversation, exactly what I said, about supporting our student athletes. And you never, there's some compass there that we've got to make sure we're supporting him in the right way for the right cause, but it was evident from the moment I kind of heard the background of that case that the result that we got yesterday was the fair result. It's a shame we had to go to that point to get the result, but ultimately, when it comes down to fairness and support for our athletes, we're going to go wherever we need to go to make that happen. And so that's what we did. And so it was a lot of communication through Coach Venables and Nagy with Owen and Justin and making sure they kind of understood the different pathways that thing could take and ultimately making sure they knew that whatever pathway it took, the University of Oklahoma was firmly behind them.
You're sitting next to a guy that can appreciate scoring a major victory over the NCAA.
I was 0-1 against the NCAA. Now we're 1-1, I guess. Now that we're firmly in this NIL, looking back at your resume, I mean, every box that needed to be checked in order to make sure that we had the right guy in place, you've had that in your past background. So moving forward, as we move into the NIL era, and it continues to grow, and it continues to be, in my opinion, unsustainable. Where do you see us going? I know, how are you going to deal with that, with the ever-changing landscape of the NIL and the dark money that comes in and donor involvement, all of that stuff? Now that's your job. How are you going to handle that?
Yeah, I think that's where my background comes into play. That's NIL's fairly new to college athletics, or at least legal NIL is fairly new to college athletics.
Didn't you get to Illinois just as the NIL was kicking off, right?
Within days after the Alston court ruling. So NIL got approved July 1st. My start date was July 9th.
Right.
So it's the only thing I've known in college athletics is this NIL era. But I tell people, NIL's almost 5 years old in college athletics, but it's not a new concept. I've been writing the words name, image, likeness in contracts for 2 decades at this point. And so representing athletes and entertainers and sporting goods companies and endorsers that engaged with athletes and entertainers, like those are licenses of intellectual property owned by human beings. I've been doing that for 2 decades. And so what I've talked a lot about is understanding what's possible in that market, right? Right now, we're all kind of following the leader. You see something out there that another school does, let's go try it that way. That's a new way to move in this. Well, now we get a chance to look back on some of the things I was doing 10, 15 years ago and say, well, outside of sports, here's how they dealt with NIL. Let's try some of that stuff. And so we'll get into a lot of different things. Group licensing will be a big deal for us, especially given the history of this program. And so we're going to take some of those concepts that folks outside of sports have done for a long time and bring them to what we're doing here at Oklahoma.
When you talk about group licensing, explain that a little bit further. I've heard through the grapevine that there's going to be some branding. Are we going to look like NASCAR down there where we got all kinds of patches on our jerseys? Talk about that.
No, absolutely not. But the jersey patch is coming to college athletics, and the one place you'll hear me really applaud the NCAA is I think they've been really careful about how they legislate that. And so the legislation out there right now, I think, allows a maximum of 2 jersey patches. I don't see a scenario where we're even going to 2.
Yeah.
And so we'll keep it clean. We'll make sure.
Is it going to be? Is that player's choice, or how's that going to?
No,
work?
we'll sell it from the institution, and that's that's going to be a discussion that we have alongside the folks at Jordan Brand and Nike to make sure we're doing it in a way that again keeps our jersey clean and is tasteful. Our fans will appreciate it. We're not going to look like a NASCAR team.
Right, okay.
Let's dig into resources here, Roger, specifically as it pertains to football and talent acquisition, because I think in the minds of so many, the presence of the NIL era has leveled the playing field, i.e. when everybody can dish out a certain amount of money in the realm of talent acquisition, the old advantages that a place like Oklahoma once held might not be as conspicuous as they were once upon a time. So for you stepping into this role, where do you feel as though Oklahoma can gain that upper hand? What, in order for the Sooners to return to the pinnacle of college football, what does the new ace in the hole need to be at a place like this?
Yeah, I don't think we can accept that the playing field is level now. We got to do everything we can to continue to find edge, right? And so NIL is a huge part of it, making sure we've got the resources to build the roster that we want. And so we've talked a lot in our staff and with Jim and Coach Venables. I think what I would generally say about our NIL operation, we don't want kids that are coming here because of what we're paying them. But we don't ever want to lose a kid that we want because we didn't pay them. And so that
retention is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And so
especially with your special players, the guys that really you want to bring them in young and cultivate their talent. The problem is the transfer portal has giving them an excuse to either quit or move on or get into, a bidding war, which is unfortunate for college athletics. And I don't know if the executive order that Trump signed, it just kind of got slipped in. It's not really being talked about. Is that thing got teeth? Whether it's 4 to play or 5 to play 4, and there's no more jumping in the transfer portal, which really to me is that's where the chaos is really created.
Yeah, I think the executive order certainly has merit to it. Anytime the president signs an executive order, you have to pay attention to it. You're already seeing the NCAA act on some of the eligibility stuff. There was some news that came out yesterday. They're starting to kind of solicit feedback on some ideas they've got on age-based eligibility. And so we'll see some of that come through. The executive order, in my estimation, one of the issues with it is it directed the NCAA to make a lot of these changes. Well, the Supreme Court 5 years ago almost said the NCAA couldn't do some of the things that the executive order has now directed them to do. So we'll continue to monitor it and see how it plays out, but ultimately I think the outcome from that order is it's going to spur action of some sort, and ultimately that's what we need right now. Instead of kind of continuing to sit on the sideline and complain about what's out there, we need people to just act and start taking care of some of these things.
Well, it starts with the leadership of the ADs, but you got to have a collective group of the ADs that say enough is enough, it's unsustainable. And I know we've talked about with President Harris, his opinion, we're going to union, it has to go to union, right? But how do you force it to get to union? And you have to have the ADs all on board and say, look, I don't know what the bad news, the worst case scenario is, like you tell the players, unless you guys agree to some collective bargaining, we're going to have to shut down college sports.
Yeah, that's
the worst case scenario. But
the issue, we can go deep on this. This is where the lawyer side comes out. There's two ways, right? The thing that is causing all of these issues is antitrust risk, right? Every time we try to do anything to control or limit the market, we get sued under a theory of antitrust law. And so there are two ways to get exempt from that. One is congressional action. Congress isn't doing much of anything these days, so can't rely on that.
Let's go with number two.
And so number two is collective bargaining. There's an antitrust exemption through Sherman Act, Clayton Act for collectively bargained unions. The issue is under federal labor law, management can't organize the union. So we need the players
to do that,
to organize the union for themselves. Right now, there's no incentive for them to do that because the absence of a union's working out pretty well for them, or at least on its face, right? They've got freedom of movement. They're making more money. But what I think and what I'm willing to kind of guess what will happen is they will realize soon that freedom of movement isn't all that it's cracked up to be, right? When you start to really see graduation rates fall and things like that, freedom of movement might be great for this 4 or 5 year period, but it's going to cause limitations in the long term that aren't great for the student athletes either.
But the amount of the money that's going in the hands of these players and that it's out there, it doesn't really incentivize them to make that decision collectively. There's got to be a force. Where's that force going to, and that force has to come from, you're going to lose something if you don't do something.
Yeah.
So what has to happen for that to occur, for them to go, we're going to lose it if we don't collectively come together and unionize?
Yeah, I think
got to be a push. Who's pushing, and what's the push going to look like?
Well, there's got to be a moment in time when the rates stop increasing at what they're increasing by, right? And so
that means dark money has to be out.
And there's been a lot of effort on that. We'll see if any of it works. I think we're coming into a moment right now where, for the first time a year ago, a lot of the NIL in the system was through kind of the front loading that happened on rosters. Now these deals are the deals that are actually starting to go through NIL Go and the CSE. And so we'll see how effective CSE is at limiting some of what you're talking about.
Okay.
Ask you about leadership here, Roger, because you're stepping into the shoes of a legend in Joe Castiglione, somebody who did such a fantastic job here for nearly 3 decades in his role as athletic director. He's being retained as an emeritus AD through 2029, I believe. Yeah. And so he'll be around, he'll still be active. But for you, you're a smart man, you're an experienced man, but you're also new to Oklahoma and the ecosystem that is this particular campus, this particular university. So how much are you leaning on Joe? How much is he there to guide you? Is it the type of thing where he's still actively in the mix, or has he basically communicated to you, hey, look, I'm here if you need me, but don't feel the need to rely upon me as you kind of chart your own trajectory as the AD here?
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think certainly on the fundraising side, as we continue to gather the resources to execute the Palace project, Joe's heavily involved in that. Obviously, he's got 3 decades of relationships that are critically important when you're doing a project of that scale. And so he's heavily involved in that. On the day-to-day leadership and operation of our department, it's more of the latter. Mm-hmm. Joe and I try to get together every other week. He's been incredible. Like when you step into a job like this, he left the place in incredible shape, right? And so that's an extraordinary benefit for someone like me to walk in and not immediately have fires you've got to put out. And so place is in great shape, but he's there. And we sit down for lunch, and I normally show up with a list of questions, and normally they're about how we got to a certain point or why we made a certain decision. And ultimately that's such an invaluable benefit to, when I'm looking at something, be able to go to someone and get all the context behind it, right? Because it's not always obvious on the face how you got somewhere. And generally, once I do that, and Joe explains to me, well, here was my thought process that led us down there. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Let's continue to do it this way. And he's been extraordinary. Really lucky to have him.
You said you guys sit down for lunch.
Yeah.
You got any favorite Norman lunch spots yet? You feel like a local?
So I've said this. I surprised some of the folks. We were up in Tulsa earlier this week, and coming out of the Masters, they were like, well, what's your Masters dinner? I am a creature of habit, man. Like pepperoni pizza, Caesar salad, red wine. Like that's my thing.
That's your go-to.
And so Benvenuti's. Had that exact meal last night. Go to Benvenuti's.
Couldn't be a better place.
Yeah, that's the spot. Josie and I have met. Scratch was our last lunch.
He's a big breakfast guy.
Yeah, big fan of that place as well.
University of Oklahoma has one standard, and that's the best, right?
Yeah.
From Bud to Barry to Bob, now we got Brent. We haven't had a national championship since 2000, and our pride, and from a player's perspective, from an athlete's perspective, that's why I came here. I came here to fulfill a promise I made to my grandfather at 10 years old. But when I got here, I realized that there was history here that not only deserved but required championships, not only conference, but national championship. We're close. We're good. We're not great, and we're not elite. What does Brent need to get to a place where we're now elite and we're now talking about Oklahoma's back in the run for national championships again?
That's the conversation I have with Brent every time we talk.
Okay.
And so we won't shy away from that expectation. I said it in my opening introduction. We're here to go get number 8 with Coach Venables. And so every time we talk, it's what else do we need? What can we do? And so
what tools?
Sometimes it's resources for the roster. Sometimes it's changes in the facility. Sometimes it's finding ways to build schedules that accommodate our student athletes a little bit better. It's every chance we get to improve, we do that. And so now with Jim Nagy in the mix, it's the same conversation with him. And so even just this morning, he came across something about the Seahawks doing, custom molded shoes for guys and reducing injuries through that. Like on the way in here, I'm having a conversation about custom molded shoes. Like whatever it is that helps us improve every single day, that's what I'm here for. And
get that edge. We need that edge.
Everything we do, you'll hear the word edge from me a lot, is finding edge. And so that's the goal. And ultimately, I'm not going to drive much of that, right? The football experts are those guys. And so I've got to have a lot of trust and a relationship with them where they feel comfortable coming to me with whatever the issue is, and we've got trust between one another that we're going to pull the right levers, right? We're going to have that internal dialogue about, is this something that's really necessary right now, or does this provide the most return right now? Because ultimately, again, with the resource base being finite, we've got to find the things that matter most and allocate resources to those things.
Let's talk about style for a second. Joe C has a very particular style. You look down on the sideline, you could identify Joe C.
Find the hat.
Right. You got a style yet? Have you figured it out? Where's the look?
No, we're going to go a little more casual, though. I've told our staff that.
You want to blend.
Yeah, we're not going to wear a tie as often around here.
Okay, you say that year one. I want to see if that changes. So if we have success, I'm going to say that you're going to get that swag. You're going to find some swag.
Yeah, try to keep up with President Harris.
There it is.
See those guys. That's a real thing.
There you go.
This might be a little bit unconventional given that the bulk of our conversation has been about football, Roger. But in closing, I want to pivot for just a second because football is the big thing here at Oklahoma. There's no doubt about that. But it's not the only thing. And one of your first big decisions when you got here was, okay, how do we chart a path forward for the men's basketball program? Because Coach Moser, we love him, we respect him here, but one of the things that he's fallen under fire for is the lack of results. One trip to the tournament in his 5 seasons here, and you made the decision last month, shortly after the regular season wrapped up, that we're going to run this back next year. We're going to commit additional resources to Coach Moser because we believe he's the one that can build a winner here at Oklahoma. And so for you, I know you were heavily involved in the basketball operation at Illinois. That team just went to the Final Four earlier this month. And so what do you sense it's going to take for Oklahoma to return to the national prominence conversation in the sport of men's basketball?
Yeah, our resource commitment is a huge deal, right? When we made that decision and talked about it, what we talked about was alignment of expectations, resources, and performance. We didn't have that alignment, right? We were missing a few things there. And so now, going into this off season and as we go into next year, at this point I feel like we've gotten our resources and our expectations aligned. And so we're in a place where we can say, based on the commitments we've made to the program, we're reasonable to expect that we're in that tournament and we're in the mix. And so that's been the first start, is just being really explicit about what our expectations are and backing that up and saying, and Coach Moser would attest to this, as we're in this portal, I'm saying to him very, very frequently, hey, is this what we need to make this happen? You know what the expectation is here. Do we have the resources to make this happen? And he continues to assure me that we do. Now, he always wants a little more, and I always want to go get a little more for him. But certainly at this point, I think we've got the first 2 ends of that, the resources and the expectations aligned. Now it's about building a team that performs to those expectations.
You hired a GM for that sport as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw great success over in football with that model. And I think, it's really important, in this environment, all of these new things have been added to the coach's plate, right? And so now we're not taking anything off of their plate. We're just adding additional support on the evaluation and negotiation process. But I think a lot of folks get confused and miss the mark. Like, it's still really important for us to have coaches that know how to recruit. And I think we've got that in men's basketball, we've got that in football, we've got that kind of all over our department. And so just making sure that we're identifying places where we can be supportive to our coaches, let them do the things they do best.
Roger, it's been a phenomenal conversation. We know you're a busy man. We appreciate you stopping by.
Man. Great to see you.
Likewise.
Hey,
MVP of the ADs right here, buddy.
Roger Denny, AD at the University of Oklahoma. And we are so grateful for the time that new Oklahoma AD Roger Denny gave to us yesterday here on the Bozcast. Roger referenced it. It was obvious throughout the process. Owen Heinecke had the entire Oklahoma family with him as he navigated his legal battle with the NCAA. It's time to hear from the man himself, Owen Heinecke, and his fine attorney, Mary Quinn Cooper. We got the chance to sit down with both of them. Here we are in the locker room at the University of Oklahoma, How cool is this? Brian Bosworth, these two folks right here might be the most famous folks in the state right now.
No question about it, but being in the inner sanctum of Oklahoma football, and you get a sense of how important it is for these young men to fulfill their dreams, because when they walk in here, it's an intimidating process, taking in the history and tradition that we have here at the University of Oklahoma. But once you get here, you feel like you're one of those bricklayers, right? So when you don't have full access to something that you call home, it becomes like you've been violated, right? And I think that's part of why we are here, and we're so blessed that you took the time to drive down and share how this victory came about. So because it's a legalese problem, I wrote the questions down so that I can follow as closely and concisely as I can to make sure that it's a complicated issue that you guys were fighting through. And you're also fighting a giant. And I've had that experience myself. So starting with this, what was the NCAA's position with regard to their view of the 5 to play 4, subject to the limited waivers, which is really the key here? And who decides what these limited waivers were and how they are applied? And what was your counter argument to their position?
Well, kind of the faceless NCAA decides. Mm-hmm. And so Owen finds out between the LSU game and the Alabama game last year that there's a problem with his eligibility, and he's thinking, no, this is my 3rd year of football. Mm-hmm. And the NCAA took the position that this year at Ohio State counted as one of his years. Mm-hmm. So as soon as the season was over, OU compliance department asked for a waiver, and within 30 days, it was denied, and just kind of nope, we're not going to look at this. In that packet, though, Owen's high school coach had written really a nice letter talking about Owen was a junior in the spring of 2020. Mm-hmm. Typically, he'd have 50 college coaches on his campus. Owen would have been invited to a million different summer camps, and because of COVID, he wasn't invited to any. Yeah. So really they for Owen, who wasn't a 5-star recruit, and he was playing both offense and defense. His high school coach called him a tweener. Mm-hmm. They needed to come and see him playing because they couldn't see him in person. He didn't get recruited, and he had the high school coach had tons of text messages saying the film's great, we'd love to meet the kid, but unless we see him in person, we can't recruit him. Yeah. So we argued, don't count that year against this kid. That's unfair. And they kind of fell back on this, 15 minutes of lacrosse, less than 15 minutes of lacrosse in 3 games, counting as one of his seasons. Yeah. Well, you guys know the NCAA has given waivers. The kid in Montana who got his 9th year, right. The kid in Texas that just got his 6th year because he missed the portal, and they just kind of stamped a no on Owens.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, that there's this, and I've battled this conversation with many of the players, and it's changed over the course of decades. There's a built-in, you get an opportunity to have a redshirt year. So that's that 5 versus 4. But there's also this special waiver where you have a redshirt year due to medical problems. And what I found interesting in reading the case and doing some research on it is there was a 171-page document that his team submitted, and that didn't get brought up by the NCAA as we received those documents.
Well, not only did it not get brought up, they had a declaration, which is a sworn statement saying, you never uploaded any medical. Uh-huh. So then we're like, what is going on? Are you all so unfamiliar with his file that you didn't know that we uploaded 171 pages of documents?
Right. The foresight in which to do that, though, when did that 171 document, because it had to do with your injuries back at Ohio State, or was it back in high school going into Ohio State?
Both. So, yeah, I pulled medical documents from high school when I had a shoulder injury, and then from my time at Ohio State, I was dealing, with a hip deal. So there were a handful of, documents saying that, I should deserve a medical red shirt. And those were all submitted during the initial waiver, process. So when we first requested
the waiver. So it was after you got here at the University of Oklahoma, but you went back retroactively and said, I think this is going to be an important addition. You put it in, they just said it's not there, we didn't receive it.
They said, you never uploaded the documents. Yeah. And then we're thinking, my God.
They're clearly there.
No, and nobody even looked at it?
Yeah,
and
that's
you're denying this
only
kid's
one part of the
opportunity?
shenanigans that's going on, but go ahead.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the timeline here, because Owen, obviously you had a fantastic season in 2025 at Oklahoma, breakout season. Everybody was stoked for you as a kid that grew up Sooner born, Sooner bred, dreaming to wear this uniform. It's a story that everybody can kind of rally around, and everybody did rally around you as you navigated this process with the NCAA. But I hate to call it a fallback option because that's really not what it is, but your backup plan, if this didn't work out, was to go to the NFL. Yeah. It's a lot better of a backup plan than a lot of these guys in your situation would have. Yeah. So when was it that you officially decided, hey, I want to come back to Oklahoma for another season? This is not just something that's a possibility that's on the table. This is something I want to do, and I want to go get a University of Tulsa Law School Hall of Famer in Mary Quinn Cooper to represent me.
Yeah, I think the whole time, throughout the whole process, I mean, starting in December after the LSU game, my understanding was that I was going to come back. And so when I found out that I wasn't, I possibly wasn't going to come back, I was upset because, I thought that, another year could help me, during the draft process, and, an extra year of film is never a bad thing. So the whole time I was thinking, hey, I would love to be back. And so, I never really went away from that. Like the whole time I was, being back at OU would be awesome. Being in this locker room, like the boss said, there's nothing like it. So, my heart was always at OU. But like you said, my fallback, which wasn't really a fallback, it was another great option, was to, go through the draft process, which is what I did because at the time, I didn't have the extra year of eligibility. So to be able to go through both, I think is a pretty unique experience, but hopefully one that'll serve me well this time next year.
My attorney always told me, and I've got many attorneys that we were sharing that relationships as we were walking in here. Usually, when you retain an attorney, it's never a good thing. I mean, you just hate going into lawsuits, right? And when you finish with an attorney, you either love them or you hate them. There's no question there's a lot of love in this relationship. There was a key in this particular case as I reviewed it. There was an undisclosed precedent that, to me, is the crux of your winning this case. My attorney used to tell me there's three truths. There's their truth, there's their truth, your truth, and their truth, and then there's the real truth. There's something in the middle. If you knew what this undisclosed precedent was, and it had been disclosed, and I would love to find out, how did you find out that undisclosed precedent, and talk about that, because the key of that undisclosed precedent is really, in my opinion, the reason that you guys got the win.
Well, we think we would have won without that.
Okay.
So we filed for this injunction before we had that. We thought, the NCAA's job is to protect student athletes.
Right.
And to look at the totality of the circumstances. When we first talked to Owen and to his dad, Justin, we were like, this doesn't seem right. Mm-hmm. We start digging through the documents, and then about a week before the hearing, somebody stumbles upon that document and sends it to us. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that they put in their pleadings was, nobody's ever gotten a waiver for totality of circumstances like this. And because we didn't bring that up, there's no way they could do it. And then we're like, they're hiding this? Mm-hmm. And then they're using it against us? Mm-hmm. So they did all kinds of things to try and distinguish how it was different, none of which were true.
So to me, and I hope we're talking about the same undisclosed precedent, talk about it a little bit. It's the volleyball player that had the circumstances that were exactly like what the argument that you were providing, and yet they purposely left that out.
That's right. It's a student athlete, and she wanted to play basketball but couldn't because of COVID, so she played volleyball. Mm-hmm. And then once basketball became available to her, she started playing, and she asked for an extra year. And they said, normally we wouldn't do this, but because of the totality of the circumstances, which were just like, this is exactly like Owen's case. Mm-hmm. So in court, they argued the reason it wasn't uploaded to their database, which is all.
Isn't that strange that they wouldn't upload it?
So strange.
Isn't that crazy?
And that's all somebody like OU has is their database to research. And then they're dunning us because we didn't find anything in the database. So when I asked their attorneys, I said, why wasn't that uploaded? And he said, I'm going to have to look into that.
Wouldn't that be in disclosure? I mean, you're asking for disclosure of any and all cases relevant to this particular.
It should have been.
You're talking volleyball to basketball. We're talking lacrosse to football.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter the sport,
exactly.
But the circumstances are exactly
and because of COVID and because of lack of recruitment. So then another, the fascinating thing to me as a trial lawyer, they did not bring a witness to Norman to testify.
That's just the arrogance of the NCAA.
Exactly. And then they have these sworn declarations which have demonstrably false information in them. So in the declaration, they say, well, the reason we don't have this is because it hasn't been approved by the committee yet. And so even though the staff has said it's okay, it hasn't been approved by the committee.
It would have been approved after this case was final if they had won. That's when they would have uploaded
Yeah, exactly.
Number one, and number two, this student athlete season began October 27th, 2025. She played her last basketball game March 7th. So what in the hell are they going to do if it's
over? Yeah,
yeah, the season's over.
Yeah.
And so I said in closing argument, what are they going to do if it's not approved? And then the lawyer gets up and says, oh, we knew it would always be approved. That was just kind of pro forma. And I'm like, why didn't you upload it then?
Right.
So I do think that really hurt them.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to us about trial day. You've been in a courtroom many times over the years. Owen, I can't imagine that you ever figured you would be in the midst of all of that, at the center of all of these circumstances. So what was Thursday like in your experience, through your eyes?
Yeah, and Mary Quinn can testify to, I was hesitant to go the injunction route. Like, I did not want to go super public and go to court and all this stuff, and I think that's why, we were running pretty close to the draft days, because I was trying to figure out whether this is something I wanted to do or not. But, ultimately decided to go forward with it, and, I wasn't nervous leading up to it, but as soon as I stepped in the courtroom, like, I sweat through my suit. I was, I was nervous, and I don't know why, because all I had to do was get up there and tell the truth. So, and, Mary Quinn did a great job of prepping me, so I felt, as ready for it as I possibly could have been. But, just being in a courtroom and, you see movies and all this stuff, so being in there is something that's totally different from what I was ever used to.
You had a couple star witnesses in Brent Venables and Jim Nagy.
Yeah, and JJ Tapano, my high school coach.
He might have stolen the show, man.
I know. How crazy is that?
Holy smokes.
I know it.
But to hear Brent Venables say, hey, this is a guy that can win the Boscast Award, to hear Jim Nagy bring his NFL experience into the picture, to explain the other side of it, and to explain why you deserved this extra year, why it was going to benefit you. Man, to see the entire OU community and so many key figures rally around you the way that they did, man, as a kid that, as we said, grew up dreaming to wear this uniform, what did that mean to you throughout this whole ordeal?
Oh, it was really special. I like to say that, coaches have two hats, their coaching hat and then their personal hat. And Coach V's coaching hat is one that is not, normally super applauding of people. So to be able to hear him have his coaching hat off and, have his normal hat on and, tell what he truly felt about me was pretty special. So it was awesome. It was crazy, to see them go to war for me like that. And, my coach, Coach Dryland, just walked in and he showed up at 7:45 for the case. He was 45 minutes early. So, just to have the support of the team and the coaching staff is definitely something that's super special.
Well, Sooners everywhere are stoked to have Owen Heinecke back in 2026. But, Boz, I would say few are as excited as this man here, linebackers coach Nate Dreiling.
Look, I thought my smile was big. Watching him and the reaction that he has, I know what it means to have impact players, not only on the field, but more importantly in your team meeting room, in the locker room, on campus. Talk to me about the reaction that you had when you heard when it came down and we said we got him back. 38's a Sooner again.
Yeah, that was a long day. I was at the court case early on, but I had to come back. We had practice that day, so I was literally in film with the linebackers and we're watching it. And I designated one of our guys to keep track of the Twitter feeds and follow it as we go. So we'd watch a play, we'd get an update. We'd watch a play, we'd get an update. And then he's like, "We won, it's over," and it just the whole place erupted, which is so cool because there's a lot of people in there that are battling for spots, and now Owen's coming back, and they're even cheering with that because they understand the big picture of this and what it's going to do for everybody.
Brent Venables talked and Jim Nagy talked on the stand on Thursday about how far Owen has the opportunity to go in the year ahead for him at Oklahoma, how much more he has the opportunity to evolve and to grow as a player. I think a good frame of reference for most folks and kind of understanding just how far that is would be to get your angle on this.
Yeah.
How far has Owen already come since you showed up here last year?
Yeah, that's what I was talking with Justin, his dad, after the case, and it was funny because literally a year ago, no one even knew who Owen Heinecke was, relatively speaking.
True.
He was a special teams guy, hadn't played a lick of actual defense, and now everyone in the state of Oklahoma and perhaps the entire country knows who Owen Heinecke is. but it doesn't happen overnight, right? Last year he was voted the hardest working guy over the summer, but what he's done, he's just constantly gotten better and constantly outworked people, and he had his opportunity and made the most of it. Coach Boz, I call him Coach Boz. Coach Boz talked to the linebackers yesterday about capitalize on your moments and gave some examples of his life. But that's what Owens has done. He's been in the back of the weeds and been hidden essentially. But man, his moment came. His first start, he was all SEC Player of the Week, and he's just going to continue to take off. And his leadership qualities, you guys know how he carries himself. It elevates everybody. But as far as on the field, it's going to be hard to find a better linebacker and probably a better linebacker duo with him and Kip.
I know you're not a spotlight-seeking guy, but come on. It had to be pretty cool to take Owen Field yesterday to many men, which became the anthem for OU football throughout the 2025 campaign.
Yeah, I told Coach Field, like, hey, I don't want to do anything that would take away from the team. These guys are the people that have worked hard for the past 4 or 5 months. So, you know, I don't want to do anything that would take away from the team. And his response is, okay, well, we're going to walk you out at the end to many men. And I was like, yeah, that's definitely pretty low-key. So it was actually really cool. You know, I was probably, a little bit nervous for it because I've never run out, in front of that many fans by myself, but it was awesome. It was, something that I'll never forget. It's pretty special.
Tell what you thought about Kip being there, though.
Oh, Kip made it easy. Kip is, throughout this past year, he's been the biggest supporter and the biggest cheerleader. So to have him, meet me halfway. I told, Kip, I was like, hey, I was running out of things to do with my hands. So you meeting me halfway was perfect. Yeah.
I know you're humble. I've had the opportunity to visit with you. You're super intelligent. You're very introverted, I would say, very much like me in some regards when I was young. Talk about that moment when you got that denial of the waiver request. Be human for a second. What was your visceral reaction to them saying, your dream is over, young man?
Yeah. So I was actually down in Dallas, training for the draft, and it was the week before the Senior Bowl. So I'm, talking with everybody that I can, trying to decide, hey, do I go to the Senior Bowl or do I wait to hear back on this waiver? Because, I'd love to be back at OU, but if I go to the Senior Bowl, I'm foregoing possible eligibility. So when I finally heard back on the waiver, it was, I was very upset. It was something that, was
it an internal scream, or did you really let it out and say,
I was
NCAA?
I was alone in an apartment, so maybe there was a little bit of a scream. But it was, it was something that was upsetting, but at the same time, with how, my back was up against the wall throughout the whole process, it was almost sort of like, okay, there's a little bit of finality at this point. The waiver has been denied. I can go to the Senior Bowl and get on. But it was sad to have closed the door at OU, in my mind. And throughout the whole process, I was going back and forth. I was like, no OU, maybe OU, no OU, maybe OU.
But you had to make a decision at some point in time. I'm going to either have to just let it be and let it go, or do I fight for my right to come back, to go to work and play with my boys, because I'm not finished yet. There's something special. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to come back here if there was, you finish your business and there's nothing else for you to do here. But there was something special about this particular group of men that you're playing with here. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the transformation of the locker room since I stepped on campus to now is insane. The coaching staff's done a great job of getting the right people in the locker room. And, it makes coming in here every day fun. It's a grind to be here. And, no day is easy. But, it's worth it when you have people like, Kip and Taylor Heim and, a bunch of great people by your side. Going to war with you. So, that wasn't something that I was ready to give up on just yet. And, like you said, the chance to win a national championship is always at the forefront. So I was very excited about the possibility of coming back. And, I think that's why I fought so hard and, eventually got hooked up with her because, I just wasn't ready to give it up yet. Coach Dreiling, he came in last year and, last year was obviously the most fun year for a lot of reasons, but in part because it was, I had a coach that was pouring into me. So, it was an awesome year, and it was something that I was really looking forward to having another chance at, and, something that I was willing to fight for sure.
As we tie a bow on this conversation, Owen, obviously, I think the Oklahoma fan base, the Oklahoma community, if nothing else, they're always going to remember you for this fight that you took to the NCAA and won. But you have 8-9 months left to write your legacy in a Sooner uniform. What do you hope to accomplish between now and the last time you wear this uniform that you hope the Sooner faithful will remember you for?
Oh, golly, that's a loaded question. I would say, I'm excited for this year. It's going to be a different year. Like, all my buddies that I came in with are now gone, and they're either at different schools or they're headed to the NFL. So I'm excited to kind of step into more of a leadership role this year. The legacy that I hope I leave is just one that I made this place better. That's hard to do because this place is already so great. But to have a small part in a great organization like this is something that's really special. Obviously having my uncle won a national championship here, and that team was very close, and they keep up to this day. So I would say number one is to win a national championship for sure.
So here at Oklahoma, there's a great tradition. Great players make great plays. We've had 2 players, one on the team and one off the team, make outstanding plays. So they get game balls. We got 2 MVPs, most valuable player in Owen Heinecke, and most valuable prosecutor in Mary Cooper. They deserve game balls. They both get game balls. Congratulations. Thank you for all your hard work. Congratulations for your future, my friend.
Thank you.
Got a lot of great things happening in your future. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you, guys.
Well, when was the last time you got some swag presented to you in your own locker room?
This is pretty great.
He'll be getting many game balls in the future.
Oh, I hope so.
Who we got on there? Oh, you
We
signed
got
it?
Barry Switzer, Boz.
The only one I think you need on there now is Coach Venables, because
give
we
him
got
a big
one
spot.
for Coach Switzer that represents my era. You got to get one for Coach Venables that
point.
represents yours.
Yeah, I'll keep this in my locker until I see him next.
We'll get that taken care of, no doubt. What a fantastic couple of guests for our very first episode of the Boscast, Brian.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mary Quinn Cooper, Owen Heinecke, thanks to you both for stopping
Thanks,
by.
guys.
Thank you.
And
Boomer.
thanks to all of you for tuning in to the very first episode of the Boscast. Subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts. Many more outstanding episodes are coming your way. We'll see you then.